Good day and welcome to SCO BRICS Insight, where we talk about the latest news, information and analysis of what's really going on in Russia and the BRICS. Now, my name is Rhod Mackenzie, and today I want to talk about Russia's domestic winemaking and consumption and how both are booming. Plus, the imports of foreign wines to Russia have decreased by over 50% in the last 3 years. Now, these developments coincide with the significant increase in Russian winemaking and its consumption. Plus, last year, domestic winemakers made considerable profits. Also, their sales are expected to grow even more this year. Plus, of course, Russian wine is gaining traction in new markets with recent export success to the Chinese and Turkish markets. Now, that's not to say everything is rosy. Haha, yeah, that was a pun and I did intend it. However, the industry is facing some obstacles and challenges. So what are they and what hurdles do they now face? Well, since 2022, wine imports to Russia from foreign countries like France, Italy, Portugal and Spain have decreased by 50%, resulting in a significant increase in domestic wine production and, of course, consumption. According to Russia's Organization of Vine and Wine, Russia's wine imports are expected to continue to decrease by another 50% in 2025, primarily due to Russia's increased customs duties on wines from certain countries to 25%. Now, the Russian government introduced duties with the aim of protecting the domestic market from competition, providing the sector with the opportunity to develop. Now, it was also a way to punish countries like France, Italy and Spain, who rapidly supported the sanctions against Russia. But the change was actually quite gradual. The rate was increased from 12.5% to 20% in August 2023. And then in 2024, the rate was increased to 25%. So the result and the impact is evident, a twofold decrease in imports. Now, Russian vineyards and winemakers took advantage of this favourable situation and have increased their production volumes. Since the start of the special operation in Ukraine in February 2022, wine production in Russia has increased by around 40%. Now, the most significant contribution to this growth was made by the wine-producing regions of the Black Sea coast, primarily down in Krasnodar and the Crimea Peninsula. Now, these have had the effect of increasingly substantial either prices of foreign wines in the Russian consumer market. Now, before I continue, I'd like to make an appeal. If you enjoy my videos, you can help me fund the channel and contribute to its further development. You can do this by making a small donation, which you can do by clicking on the thanks button at the bottom right hand end of the screen, or it's under the 3 dots. So click on that and you get a sub menu. Or you can also buy me a coffee in a link which is down below in the credits. Everybody who donates gets a personal thank you from me, and I'm thanking you all now for watching. And do keep the comments coming. Love to read them, love to respond to them. Now, this has inevitably led to the rise in the cost of imported products, which has limited the availability of foreign alcoholic products for end consumers. Conversely, these measures contributed to the activation of the national winemaking, thanks to the receipt of significant advantages for domestic producers over international suppliers, says Svetlana Ilyashenko, who's a professor of trade policy at the Plekhanov Russian University of Economics. However, she also notes a significant increase in prices from the so-called New World countries, including Argentina, Chile, Australia, New Zealand and South Africa, although South Africa does get a special rate for wines as it's a member of the BRICS. Now, this is not only due to the increase in customs duties, but it's also a significant increase in transportation costs and the instability of global currency markets. As a result, it's necessary to finance purchases for the wine in advance, as the entire logistics cycle from the moment of prepayment to the actual receipt of the products at the importer's warehouses takes a long period. It can be anything up to 3 to 6 months. Plus, of course, the high interest rate of the Central Bank of Russia makes credit very expensive, so people don't really want to tie up their money for that length of time and then have it sitting on the shelf. Now, the analyst also notes that the seasonal nature of wine production can also have a negative impact, with shipping dates depending on the harvest periods and obviously the vinification period. Now, as the analyst explains, the general inflationary pressure has been observed on the world market for alcoholic products in recent years, and that's exacerbated all the unpleasant factors. Now, the decline in imports is naturally advantageous for Russian winemakers. I mean, last year, domestic wine consumption in Russia amounted to 8.1 million hectolitres, equivalent to more than 1 billion bottles. Meanwhile, the production of vodka, the traditional Russian staple, fell by 26.3% and reached its lowest levels in the last decade. Now, the vacated niche in the market began to be occupied by Russian producers, and that contributed to the growth of domestic production. I mean, firstly, state support's been essential. In 2020, a law on viticulture and winemaking was adopted, and tax breaks and subsidies for vineyards was also provided. Secondly, investment in the wine regions has increased. And then thirdly, of course, the preferences of the younger population have evolved. Younger demographics are increasingly opting for lower level alcohol beverages, including wine, and are consuming strong alcohol less frequently. And as Maxim Chernigovsky, who's a professor of management at the Russian Presidential Academy in St. Petersburg, who's also head of the Club of the Alcohol Market Professional, explains, he said, last year Russian winemakers experienced a substantial increase in their profits. Consequently, the Abruzzo Group reported the highest EBITDA in its history, with a 51% increase in 2024, reaching 4.3 billion rubles. Now, the company's also announced a 43% increase in its net profit, reaching 1.8 billion rubles. Fanagoria achieved revenues of 8.6 billion rubles, and that's up 46%. The company's net profit was also up to 61%, reaching 1.6 billion rubles. Now, the sparkling wine producer of Lev Goldstein increased its net profit in 2024 by more than 39% to 1.1 billion rubles. However, in 2025, winemakers don't anticipate more enormous growth as a trend, because it's only going to see a moderate increase because they've had the big growth. So revenue rises of 5 to 10% on an annual basis. It's really all that can be expected. But even that's a positive indicator. But we've got to make sure that high prices do not eliminate the potential to generate further revenue. Now, in light of the recent increase in import prices, there's a corresponding rise in the cost of domestic wine bottles. Now, it's evident that Russian populace is not going to put up with increasing additional costs. For example, in the last fiscal year, high-end spirits such as whiskey experienced a surge in prices, and that caused a swift decline in sales. This year, it appears that consumers have come to terms with the price rises, and some of the demand for strong spirits has come back to a level, but not fully recovered to there in 2025, according to RATC. Now, the majority of Russian wines are currently sold in the mid and premium segments, with a price range of 500 to 1,500 rubles per bottle. That's about $5 to $15. Now, in this regard, they're able to successfully compete with foreign counterparts. Sparkling wine sales are growing rapidly, with 25% growth in 2025. Now, this growth indicates a shift in consumer preferences, with sparkling wines becoming a viable alternative to imported champagne. Now, Chernigovsky, he asserts that Russian products are distinguished by their unique character, and that's brought about by the soil and the climatic conditions of the regions, and the emphasis on the use of the indigenous grape varieties. However, that That said, the industry still faces significant challenge, and it's evident that Russian companies utilise the same wine materials imported in their production processes as they do abroad. So this causes a rise in the price of imported wines, which has led to an increase in Russian products. For the wine sector in Russia, the primary challenges are limited availability of domestic grape raw materials. I mean, high excise taxes reduce the competitiveness of wine compared to beer and vodka, and regional bans of sales and catering reduce the turnover, according to Chernigovsky. Now, he believes that for the industry to really substantially grow, it's necessary to expand the amount of and area of vineyards to 180 to 200,000 hectares from the current 105,000, reduce the excise taxes and grant temporary permission to use imported wine materials from friendly countries like South Africa or Chile until the shortage of raw materials is eliminated. Now, it's evident that Russian wines have considerable export potential also. It's been noted that the Chinese market has seen significant growth in the last 2 years. I mean, last year, Russian wine exports to China reached $1.4 million, which is 8% more than the year before. But the exponential growth in supply has been seen in 2025. For example, in the first quarter of 2025, exports in monetary terms surged by 4.3 times to $1 million, and in volume there was a 3.2-fold increase to 700 tons. Now, the Chinese market, with its growing demand for wine, represents a significant opportunities. However, for Russia to consolidate its position, investment in promotional activities are actually going to have to be carried out. The Chernigovsky is of the opinion that in China, Russian wine is considered a premium product, and according to him, Russian winemaking has the potential to double its production in the coming years, providing the issues regarding the raw materials and taxation are addressed. And a concerted effort is made to penetrate the foreign markets. So what's the standout? Well, sparkling wine. It made up nearly 2/3 of all Russian wine exports into China during Q1 2025, and its presence surged mostly in March, which was a stark contrast to the same month of 2024, when not a single bottle of Russian champagne crossed into China. Now, this export leap isn't just limited to China. Of the roughly 1,000 tons of Russian wine exported worldwide in Q1, China accounted for a massive 72%, followed by Turkey at 18%. So clearly, China is now the dominant destination for Russian wines. In contrast, the segment of smaller, strong alcohols experienced in the opposite trend. Vodka production in Russia decreased by 11% in the first half of 2025 compared to the same period last year. The Chernikovsky attributes this to two key factors: the rise in excise taxes and the 21% increase in the minimum selling price. Changes in consumer habits are also having an effect. With young people having smaller budgets, they become less likely to purchase both vodka and expensive strong drinks. Although retail sales of whiskey, rum and gin are growing, but most of those tend to be Russian made. Anyway, that's the situation with Russia and alcohol. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and also share with others who might enjoy the videos. And if you want to make a donation, buy me a coffee or click on the thanks button at the bottom of the screen. I'll see you all again soon. Thank you.